Hello. We are starting off with Unguess Me. And Oti, I'm going to guess who you think was the funniest character in Petty Mission. In 3, 2, 1.
Pete
Paul Drake.
Strickland.
Okay. I thought you were going to not be real and because he's not funny at all. So I thought you were just going to be a dick about it.
It's funny to me.
Well, let's continue the dicks and get on with the show. Howdy, friends and lovers. Welcome back to the For You Reference Podcast. You got your host, Katie.
And Oti.
And pay your tithes, but ignore your wives. Because this week, court is in session with HBO's Perry Mason. Woo-hoo-hoo. Indeed. It feels good to be covering a show in relative real time, OT. Let's just do this.
It's been a while.
It's been a whole while. Let's start off with the stats, interrupting OT, which is what we do around her. It was released in June of 2020, the year that would never end. We have creators of Way of Ron Fitzgerald and Roland Jones. Executive producer Robert Downey Jr., would you believe, OT?
Okay.
He was actually slated to star as Perry Mason, but with scheduling conflicts, he didn't. But he remained an executive producer of the show.
Nah, I'm glad Matthew Rhys was on it.
Okay, settle down. You know, we don't have to be at DMX 100 at the start of the episode, my love. These are based on novels from Earl Stanley Gardner, and this show seemed to want to follow more of the darker sort of intrinsic nature that the novels have, as opposed to the show that came out quite a decade ago. Network of HBO. HBO is a darling in the For You Reference household. Cross off your bingo cards. We've done The Wire. We've done Deadwood. Surely going to do Sopranos and Oz anytime soon.
Oz sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later. Let's just quickly rattle off the top cast of this show. We have Matthew Rhys, Juliet Rylance, Chris Chalk, and John Lithgow. Lithgow or Lithgow?
Lithgow.
I think it's Lithgow if you're feeling nasty. So there we go. Those are the stats. Let's dive into first impressions, OT. I guess, give us a peppering if you've ever heard of Perry Mason before. And I guess generally how you felt over the series. It's also an opportunity to say spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. So if your holes are not ready for us to spoil you, then perhaps peruse our catalogue. But back to OT's back catalogue, how did you feel about the series?
I did not know what to expect going into Perry Mason. I've never heard of Perry Mason. So
not even the Perry Mason,
not
just
even
Perry Mason.
Perry Mason. And I just thought it would be one of those old shows. And I didn't really know what to go with. And the first episode, the pilot, it got interesting as it went on.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I didn't know Tatiana Maslany would be in this. And I don't think she was in the first episode, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. But when she showed up on the screen, wow. I was sold.
I think you had to do a double take because she's blonde in this show.
I did not need a double take. I've seen her in all sort of hairstyles.
Oh, see, because I haven't watched Orphan Black. So with her alters, she has different visual.
Yup.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, this is not the Tatiana Stan podcast, OT. That is the OT After Hours. But yeah, she's not in all episodes, but definitely she gravitated to your attention. Is there anything else you want to say about the series, or is it just a Tatiana Stan?
It's a Tatiana Stan, and it's a good show. It's a good watchable show.
It's a great fucking show. Come on now.
I wouldn't say great. It's a good show. Now you need to calm down a bit.
How fucking dare you, OT? How fucking dare you. This show, the way that we came across this show, because I don't think it was even on your radar for us to watch, right? This was something I introduced into the For You Reference bed chambers. And the way I came across it was Aisha Tyler, my non-best friend, but my best friend in my head. She had like a sponsored post about Perry Mason.
Oh.
So, you know, say what you will about influencers and sponsored posts, but they're very effective on Katie if it's through way of Aisha Tyler. Yeah, because she mentioned Perry Mason and it just sounds like a nothing show, right? It's like, okay, it just sounds like a show. Yeah, cool, whatever. And I'm like, let's just give it a go. Because The Boys is coming up soon and Aisha Tyler's doing the after show for The Boys. So, you know, you trust you know, wherever you can.
For sure.
In a healthy sense. I know we're not really best friends. If this
You say that, but when I look at you, your eyes betray your words, mate.
I imagine OT is Aisha Tyler. If this was a video podcast, I would put up a photo of myself and Aisha Tyler when she came for the Oz Comic Con, but OT wouldn't be in the picture. It would just be me and Aisha. But generally for this show, quality is
Qualita.
well, there you go. You can never deny. I really enjoyed it. I guess this is where I pull up both of my monocles, which we've established it becomes a spectacle, and say this is definitely a show that it has very nice pacing, but what it also means for the TikToks and the Snapchats of this generation is you need to appreciate this show. Right? It's not going to be, you know, splooshing from all engines, from all angles. It really, even the pilot, I think it really started to build brick by brick. So I wouldn't say it's slow, but it's the nature for these type of shows that are set, you know, in the 1930s, where you really are, you know, not painstakingly, but you are accumulating the emotional investment or even just the character development, because there is some glorious character development in this show, OT. So overall, loving it. Great times. You know, we don't know when we'll get the next season. But it is a delicious handful of episodes to delight in. There are quite a lot of, I guess you could call it themes or like sort of clusters of characters that I want to talk about. But I do want to just quickly go through the cast and where we've seen the cast before. So Matthew Rhys, I fucking love him. I did not watch The Americans, and I feel like based on his performance in Perry Mason, I feel like out of splooshiness and out of splooshy mountiness, I need to go and watch The Americans.
You do?
Because I fucking love him. He also had quite a stint on the TV show Brothers and Sisters.
Yeah.
But the most surprising, and I still don't know how this feels in my soul, he was in something called Death Comes to Pemberley, and he actually played Fitzwilliam Darcy.
I have no idea what Death Comes to Pambala is.
Pambala? Was this set in Kenya? Or is Pambala on the coast?
Death Comes to what?
Death Comes to Pemberley.
Oh, all right.
I'm like Jenna from 30 Rock, where I say some things with an English inflection.
The Roger.
The Roger. Listen to our 30 Rock episode, friends and lovers. I don't know how I feel about anyone playing Mr. Darcy except for Colin Firth. So I guess my love affair with Matthew Rhys was cut short. But there you go. Juliet Ryland, who plays Della Street, who is kind of not even recognizable on her IMDb photo. She was in something called McMafia, American Gothic, and The Nick. You watch a lot of TV shows, so I wasn't sure if you've seen any of these.
No.
Okay, so that's fine. Chris Chalk, he's actually secretly a darling of the For You Reference household. When They See Us, which we covered last year. Right?
Yeah, last year.
What a time. He's also plays Lucius Fox in Gotham. Great series. Need to finish it. He was also in The Newsroom.
Yeah. He's in a lot of things.
And you know what? Like, he's that guy, when he pops up in something, you're like, oh, it's nice to have him. It's nice to have him. Just continue to be in our screens and in our eyes. And just lastly, we have John Lithgow. I will call him Lithgow. Come and fight me, bitches. Unless you're actually from the Lithgow lineage, then I will accept it. Speaking of lineage, he is in The Crown. Third Rock from the Sun, obviously, is probably the most like go-to sort of recognition you would have for him. Similar to our Bryan Cranston with Malcolm in the Middle, right?
Are you telling me?
Huh?
Are you telling me your most recognizable role for Bryan Cranston is Malcolm in the Middle?
I'm saying Third Rock from the Sun is probably the first sort of introduction you have to John Lithgow, and it's something that you would reminisce and look back on.
Okay.
We're still not covering Breaking Bad. Fuck off. That is a big Succession. Fuck off.
No, I agree with you. We won't cover Breaking Bad. I know later the show do a really good job of
we
that.
We collabed with them about a year ago. Go and check it out. I think we will eventually. We're a TV movie podcast, so we'll see you guys in 10 years. And also, most notably, John Lithgow was also in Shrek OT. He played Lord Farquaad. But I had a literal ogre in our Shrek episode, so that's why we didn't get to talk about John Lithgow in our Shrek episode.
Oh, really? Is that what happened?
That is exactly what happened. But that is the cast. I guess it was nice to take a little trip for where the actors were and where we've seen them. Some new, some we haven't seen before. But let's tackle this show in clusters. Obviously, there are a lot of themes that do get explored, but I think the best way to discuss this show is in clusters and the characters in proximity to those clusters. So let's obviously start off with the titular character, Perry Mason. He starts off as a private investigator and then he transitions into becoming a lawyer. A lot of the book focuses on him as a lawyer, but I really appreciated in the show that we got to see his rise and his growth in career. I actually do prefer a scruffy Mason, I must say, a Freemason, if you will. Even when he was all like, when he was all cleaned up, I still didn't buy it. But anyway, so let's talk about Perry Mason as a character. I will say, before halfway through the pilot, I turned to you and I said, he strikes me as a McNulty from The Wire, where he does questionable things, but it's always for the intended good.
Yep.
And he's fucking great at what he does. So for a lot of the time, even if you don't like him, he does get graces where probably other people wouldn't.
Agreed. Like I loved the way we saw real, true, unapologetic character development in Perry Mason and his relationship with EB, and you know how much that sort of meant to him.
Yep.
He saw EB as a father, and we know he had issues with his sort of parents growing up.
Welcome to Daddywood.
Exactly. And the fact that EB meant so much to him, especially after his stint in the war, and to lose him in such a way, I think it sort of gave him an opportunity to sort of live up to what EB was and what EB would have wanted for him. So I just fully got on board with the sort of Perry Mason character development and how Della Street sort of initiated all that, just because of how Mason was so intertwined with the sort of legalities of how everything works and how he understands people at an intrinsic level. So it was all just unraveling before our eyes. I was all for it. I was buying it. His performance was just like, you can't watch Matthew Rhys and think that he's not putting his all in a role.
Absolutely.
He's one of those people that truly are underrated. I don't think people talked about him that much. The Americans was really great, and watching him just do this so seamlessly in Perry Mason is
But it's effortless as well. Like, you don't see him acting.
Yeah. It's like someone just rolled out of bed and it's him. He's Perry Mason. Who's Matthew Rhys, mate?
Exactly. Aside from a thespian. Oh, absolutely. I like that you touched on his PTSD as well. I like the way that it was laid out in the series, and we were slowly given some more information. We were informed about, this disgrace that he felt, and to find out that it wasn't even like it was a necessary evil, right?
Yeah.
He was seeing his comrades dying, and he obviously he did the right thing, but there's that guilt that has weighed on him, and it continues to weigh on him, and we see that unravel through the series.
Yeah, it's the classic Porco Rosso conundrum,
Porco Rosso.
It's sort of, you've survived this war, but the things that you had to do and watching your friends die, having to kill most of them at least to put them out of their misery, it will be hard for anyone to sort of focus or to try and pull themselves up by the bootstrap to be functional in society. And to see him sort of battle that and try to be a good father, a present father, at least the effort that he makes towards that is quite admirable in my opinion.
Yeah, and we talk about it in a couple of episodes, but he loved and he received love in the capacity that he was able to. In many cases, it wasn't enough. In many cases, it was through his vices, but he really was a protagonist that you just latched onto.
Oh yeah.
And I think the reason for that is because it was so genuine. That survivor's guilt that you were talking about, it didn't need to be explicitly said to us as the audience. We felt the motions in his, investigating of cases, the way he cared so much for Charlie Dodson and wanting to get justice for him.
Yeah, and to see that things that still shock him, because the way Charlie Dodson died, and that what they did to his body afterwards in sewing of his eyes open,
yeah,
it shows you that you could go through shit and there's still some things, fucked up things in the world that could fucking shock and mess you up.
Yeah, and he still has that sense of humanity in him, and he still has that capacity for love. Because that's also what it means. You feel the highs and lows of all emotions. And I definitely love the way that the series tackled this. We love dark humor. We love morbid humor. And there was definitely droves of that in this series.
Oh, for sure.
You spoke a bit about him as wanting to be a present father. So I guess just a little note for Linda Mason. I don't think there's any right or any wrong. I think it's unfortunate that they couldn't stay together, but a lot of life's calamities do unfortunately result in couples and marriages breaking apart, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think they're just casualty to the circumstance. Whether it's him shutting himself off emotionally or him, drowning himself in a pool full of liquor, Kendrick Lamar reference. I think I don't think there was any evil person in that marriage.
No, not malicious intent at all.
Unless we're like fully in the Perry Mason camp and we can't see objectively. I do feel like they're just victims of the circumstance, But it was interesting to see. Linda definitely has boundaries with Perry, and we see that, when they're on the way to the funeral. And he drops by. But there's definitely more story that I hope that they explore in the next season. But it definitely denotes to, one of the saddest things was when we see the gift that he bought for his son be returned.
Yeah.
Do you think it was because he couldn't afford the postage, or do you think that was because Linda sent it back?
Linda sent it back.
Right?
Yeah.
Fucking bitch. But again,
you just said victim of circumstance and no one is in the wrong, and then
hey
next
man,
minute
I've drunk the Perry Mason Kool-Aid. What can I tell you? But yeah, so Perry is obviously integral to this show. There are touch points for Perry throughout this show. So let's move on to some more clusters. Yeah. So I'm assuming this show is going to, like, each season is going to capture different cases.
Yep.
It didn't seem like it until the last episode of the first season, where we have Emily Dodson completely embrace the Radiant Assembly of God. So that kind of closed her story. I thought they were going to open that again because of a mistrial. And then they introduced this new lady, right? So I think season 2 is going to follow another storyline. It might broaden like the Radiant Assembly of God and their corruptness, but I think they're going to explore another story. In any case, season 1 really surrounds the Dodsons.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, well, pretty much Emily, Matthew, Charlie, Herman Bagley, who's Matthew's dad, and also George Gannon as well. So just, I guess every sort of conversation will touch all of those characters.
Okay. So we started off with the kidnapping of Charlie Dodson. We see a kid dropped in a blanket in a tram. Is that a tram or a train? Surely not
it's
a tram.
Tram. I think trains are like, they have their own tracks, right?
All right.
Trams are embedded within the street.
Yeah, and I didn't know what to expect. I was like, okay, these are quite generous kidnappers to do this and just,
Leave the baby there.
leave the baby all sort of easy. It really never is that simple. And then for them to get the baby and the wife is super excited and I'm like, okay, what's the catch? There's something surely going to happen. Only for the father, Matthew, to lift the hood up and reveal that his eyes were sewn open. That was messed up. That imagery alone, man.
Yeah.
To a kid. In your mind, you're thinking, was this done when he was still alive? You'd go through all the sort of scenarios through your head and just feel the anger, the pain of losing the person that you love. Like, I don't know. It was just one of those things that I didn't really expect. And it happened in the first sort of 5 minutes of the show. I was like, fuck, we're going to get a good show right here.
Well, it's a wild ride.
It's a wild ride. It will be a wild ride. And sort of reveal how all this happened and the sort of affair, the love triangle, all the sort of aspects that make it a really intriguing story. And for us, at least as audiences, we were trying to sort of, at least for me, I was trying to sort of try and think who did it.
Yeah.
I always suspected the wife. I always thought she had something to do with it. It just seemed so obvious.
But I think that denotes to what's wrong with all of us, right? Because they definitely geared the show in that way. It was very easy to make that assumption, especially if you're fucking in the next room and you leave your baby for that guy to Norman Bates your kid through the hole.
Yeah, like there was so many scenarios where...
Yeah. And it wasn't as if there was a misdirect. It wasn't they were deliberately, forcing us to believe it was Emily. But it definitely played on our prejudices of, the cheating woman, right? And Matthew was the cuckold.
Yeah.
Right. So it definitely played to the shitty attitudes that we have. And it did it so brilliantly. When there was a turn in the series, and it was definitely in the last half of the first season, where we start to think, shit, she's just a lady that had an affair. And it doesn't go beyond that. You know what I mean? A lot of the series, I was so irate. Even just Emily being in a scene was pissing me off.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that is credit to the show to have a character that you just fucking hate so much and to turn that around in less episodes that they established. That is incredible writing. Because if you were to tell me that I would have one iota of sympathy in Emily's direction, I would tell you to, again, fuck off. But it does it so well. And it really felt, this is definitely, we talk about, shows that feel like the episodes are all the same. This is really an event. Perry Mason is a show that benefits from a week-to-week installment. You watch it, you consume it, you theorize, you discuss, you reflect on how you felt about characters, and then you get another tasty morsel a week later. Surely you could binge this show, but its benefit is really in the way that it is delivered.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of sort of trying to see how I myself I could sort of binge this. I think the time in which it lets you simmer with what you've just consumed is sort of pivotal.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it makes you reflect on the sort of thinking, especially when you have this happening super early. You know, it's a sign of the times where women weren't looked as sort of equal partners.
Yeah. They were like a side dish to the main meal of the man.
So for them to sort of write this angle, and I was also on the train of just fucking hell, I can't stand Emily at all.
Yeah.
To where they brought all the sort of nuances to it all. And I was like, it was a conflict in my mind. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And I was starting to ask myself these questions. And even when, you know, in between episodes, in between the sort of 5, 6, 7 days we have to wait for the next episode, I was always sort of thinking about what it meant for Emily at the time and how it all unraveled.
Because it's one of those things, she's like, I'm not guilty. And we're like, yeah, of course you would fucking say that if you were guilty or not, right? But it's very interesting because what we know is on the surface with Emily. And then even with Matthew, we knew from the first episode that he was gambling away, you know, any sort of livelihood for the family. He was drinking it all away. He was a spoilt son of a very rich man, right? So we knew all of this, yet we kept pointing the finger towards Emily.
Yeah.
Interesting, right? And I love how there's a broader story for, you know, corrupt religious institutions because, again, when you're ready, friends and lovers, we will dive into that. But I really enjoyed the way that we were taken on, you know, this journey. And we, you know, we had homework. We definitely had homework. Watch the episode, contemplate about it, except that you're a shitty person for thinking it was her the whole time. And let's do it again next week, right? So it was very compelling. At first I was like, mate, this is a what do you call it? A shut and close. Like it's a no-brainer, mate. Like it's her. And then they just kept reinforcing, you know, our prejudices and playing on that. And it's like, oh fuck, we're the problem. We're the problem watching this. So it was really interesting to go through that, and I really felt for Perry Mason when he kept the thread in that matchbox, right? And it was his internal quest to find justice.
Oh yeah,
and we even see that you know, literally at the end of the series with Alice as well. But you know, surrounding the Dodsons, it really was sensationalism. And, you know, I have it further down in the list if we have time to talk about the media and the way the paparazzi was. You know, that really, you know, swelled a lot of doubt as well. And, you know, it amplified details that probably didn't need to be amplified as well. But I do have that as a point further down. Is there anything else you want to say about the Dodsons?
Yeah, the husband is crap, man. He looked also innocent. He has this sort of innocent.
Oh, yeah.
He's got this sort of baby face going for him. He looks like he wouldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah.
But to sort of start learning how he is as a partner, how he is as a husband, and then you sort of learn the sort of intricacies of his relationship with the father, who he'd kept secret from everyone.
Yeah, and then she only found out on the way back.
That was some messed up shit.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the way that it was essentially a perfect crime because she was the helpless housewife, right? That had a tryst with George Gannon. And that seemed like the end of the headline. And they probably would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for pesky Perry Mason.
Oh yeah.
But it was very compelling to have them as the counterpiece for season 1 with Perry Mason. And to see the way that Mason would interplay with all of the characters, with Emily in particular. You know, I think a lot of his attitudes also reflected how we were feeling as well as the series continued too. George Gannon, I do wonder, you know, with these sorts of characters, when you see, well, I guess without spoiling any other movie or TV show, but, you know, when you have a character that is used for a specific purpose and then their purpose has been fulfilled, do they not see it coming that they are a loose end and they're going to die? Like, did he realize that he was going to die?
Probably not.
Yeah. And even George Gannon's death was a bit of a catalyst in the series as well. Because that's where you had Perry Mason, and then you also have the intersection with Officer Drake as well with the teeth, right? I also love how Perry and Pete go into the morgue as well to like intercept the body. We also have Virgil Sheets, who's the morgue guy, saying that he can't officially, deal with the body, so they just dumped it in a golf ground.
He'll come back to him regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, mate, like, if you can't do it this way, I'm going to find a way. You're going to do it. I think because he was under the impression that they told him to come over for sex stuff.
Yeah.
And then they went downstairs and they saw a dead body. So that was funny. I think even just Perry, Pete, and Virgil, I would love to just watch their
what?
adventures.
You know what it gave me a vibe of? Bank and McNulty. Perry and Pete sort of dynamic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But let's move on to the next sort of cluster that we have, the Radiant Assembly of God. So in this cluster, we have Sister Alice McKeegan, Birdie McKeegan, who's Alice's mum, and then one of the more notable sort of elders, we have Eric Seidel, and then we also have Jim Hicks, who was an accountant that also worked with George Gannon. I guess also, if you want to just talk generally about the Radiant Assembly of God.
I think one of the sort of interesting aspects of it all is that the Radiant Assembly of God, I think, would be sort of an overlaying narrative throughout the different seasons. They'll just build on it while they focus on a sort of seasonal case by case basis, like sort of True Detective and shit.
Oh, okay.
So I'm fully bought into the sort of idea of how this would play out, and the fact that we had Alice McKeegan, Tatiana, we love her. We had Tatiana.
I've heard. Is she your best friend? Like Aisha Tyler's my best friend?
Yeah, she's my best friend.
You don't have a picture with her like I do.
Oh, soon enough. We get to walk in her shoes for a bit and see her history, or at least her relationship with her mother, which is messed up.
Oh, absolutely.
And it explains so much as to why she is the way she is.
Yeah.
So she believes that she truly does believe that she has a direct line to God. Her epileptic sort of seizures is a way that she communicates with God, or at least that's what she thought.
It's fucking painful.
Which is, it really is insane. So to see how the mother sort of plays to her daughter's weakness, or at least taking advantage of all that.
Like literally, we see a scene of her offering her daughter for them to get extra gas. My
God, I was like, surely you're not gonna do this. That was one of the most disturbing scenes in this.
Like, surely as a parent, that is a line that you would not cross, right?
And then at the end of it all, you still come and preach about religion and God, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, a lot of the sort of things that we have in the world are like that, where people in their private lives act in such an abhorrent way. And then that doesn't translate to who they are, or at least what they preach. It just pisses me off.
Oh, absolutely. And like you were mentioning, it is sad that, Alice did believe that she was, the Messiah, essentially. And, it's also very sad that even on a conscious level, even if she had some sort of sense that she wasn't the Messiah, the alternative is what? Her mother taking advantage of her.
Yeah. And
using her sexuality for gas money. Like, that is a grim alternative to what she chose to believe. If she chose, or whether she genuinely believed it.
Yeah.
That is some fucked up shit. And the way that this series starts is, we are introduced to Alice, and she is strong, and she's very certain of who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And as the series unfolds, she starts to unravel, and we start to see that she's essentially a puppet.
Yep.
She doesn't really have overruling power over the church's directions, over
the board.
Exactly, absolutely. And even so, obviously the operation, she had no say over it, but even in a sermon sort of sense, she was censored in what she could say and what she couldn't say.
Stick to the script.
Stick to the script, indeed. And Birdie was definitely, the puppeteer. And that became very clear throughout the series as well.
Well, it also became clear that Barty and Alice were all just being used by the board for their own sort of advancement. And
I also thought it was interesting that this is set in the 1930s. I thought it was interesting that a woman was at the helm of one of the most successful religions, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it was because she was pretty.
Maybe that, and also it was just because it was ideally ceremonial. It didn't mean anything to the underlying value that she couldn't change or act on anything by herself. And the fact that she was a puppet, so that makes it a little bit more believable in that sense.
But if we're talking about like the OG religions, like women are not at the top.
Oh, true.
Or even on a pastor or priest level. So I thought that was a bit interesting. If anyone has any sort of interesting tidbits about that, let me know, because we can pull our glasses up together. But I just thought that was interesting. It was set in the 1930s, and she's a woman, and she was at the helm of the church. I just thought that was interesting. That, on one side you have Emily Dodson, who doesn't have a voice, and she just serves to be the wife and the mother. But then you also have Alice on the other side of the coin, where, people actually, come to her for solace.
Yeah.
Right? So it was interesting. It was definitely interesting. I really, really enjoy, digging beneath the Radiant Assembly of God and seeing all of their investments in shady shit, and how they've become so embedded in their investments. I think Seidel was the one to say in the series, there's no way that they could live off their contributions alone.
Yeah. They were massively in debt.
Oh, yeah. And it was funny to see the way that Della Street and Perry Mason would talk to each other, the way Della Street stole the titles, essentially. And he's like, you stole the title. So it was interesting to see, how entrenched this church was.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And how they just kept amassing debt. Right? Maybe this is how I will eventually understand the Netflix model. Like they just kept amassing debt and debt and debt. And like Michael Scott, when he branches off Dunder Mifflin and he asks them to crunch the numbers.
Crunch them again.
That's essentially what George Gannon and Jim Hicks was doing, right? And George Gannon's like, you can't crunch them anymore. Right? Like, I've hit it as well as I can, but there's no more, you can't do this. Like, it's just, you've got a hopping debt and you need to address it, right?
Yep.
And that's obviously, towards his demise as well. But it was just interesting to see how entrenched they are and the roots that they have within society.
Oh, so true.
I also appreciated that they talked about how they also, a lot of the debt that they had. One of them was purchasing the radio station. As well. And you can imagine, even back then, like that would have been a very effective way, right? An analog podcast, if you will.
Yeah.
To be able to share that further information. A scene that it didn't necessarily make me uncomfortable, but it did pretty much speak to a lot of my thoughts and opinions in this sort of subject matter. When Alice was trying to get the man to walk.
Yeah. Yeah, we see a lot of those, don't we?
Oh, yeah. But usually the people that they're healing are plants. So they know that they're part of it.
True. But this was all sort of,
I think she got carried away.
The human mind is bloody remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
When you sort of the adrenaline of the moment, when you think all that is possible and you get to stand up, that's all well and good until you're not in that situation anymore and your body goes back to default.
You can fly.
You can literally fly.
That's a Key and Peele reference.
So that was really interesting.
I think that does speak to, if we're talking about the argument that Alice believed that she was ordained from on high, that would definitely be a scene to point towards that.
Yeah, but
because she chose someone and she shouldn't have. Like if she had half doubted her ability, she probably would have chose someone that was in on it, right? But she chose some random guy from the crowd.
Yeah. And I think that's where the mother's job would have been in, where to plant someone in there where Alice can come and tell them to stand up and walk and then dance on the stage and all that. But this was all, ad lib, and she picked someone who didn't really have anything to do with sort of, who's actually really paralyzed, and they stood up because of all the adrenaline rush and thinking in the mental sort of the mental state of the moment. And when that all sort of failed, he was like, that was just for a moment. And then I went back to my chair. And then Alice was like, yeah, but did you believe enough? Now that becomes your fallback.
Ugh. There's always an answer.
Your faith wasn't as strong. That's the reason why you couldn't walk.
There's always an answer. It's interesting because I thought Birdie would have tied that bow a bit more neatly, because we see, and I guess we can discuss and theorize, with Alice's newest revelation that she can bring Charlie from the dead. Whether that is ethical or not, and whether that is fair on the parent, we'll talk about that in a second. But let's just talk about Alice and her believing that she can raise the child from the dead. I think it's quite obvious to conclude that Birdie arranged for another baby to take the place of Charlie, and they removed Charlie wherever he is, but they removed him so it would be like Jesus resurrecting, right?
Jesus and or Lazarus.
Is Lazarus a place?
Lazarus is a guy who died and then was brought back to life.
Or, I guess if you want to add to the list, Job Bluth from Arrested Development. We make jokes so we don't hurt anyone too deeply about religion. But yeah, so with Birdie's whole orchestration, I just wanted to bring this point here because we talked about the fragility of the human mind, and it's astounding what the body or what the mind can do when it's under massive sort of adrenaline. And I want to bring this back to Emily Dodson. So we have, I'm pretty sure it's the last episode, nearing the end of the series, Emily goes to visit Charlie because there's been a buzz that Charlie has been resurrected. Alice is still on the loose, but obviously Emily wants to go and see the baby. And I don't think there was any ambiguity. She made comments. I think she said that Charlie was bigger and he had
longer
blue
hands.
Eyes. Yeah. So she made distinctive comments about how this is not her child, right? So I don't think there's any ambiguity about whether she believed that was her child or not. But what heartbreakingly happens within that same scene is she starts to accept that this is Charlie now. And I wanted to talk a bit about that.
It's not that she accepts that that's Charlie. She pretends to think that that's Charlie. And I think that's a massive
And that is a way of acceptance.
Yes, because when she was saying all the sort of differences between the new baby and Charlie, you could see Buddy's reaction thinking, oh, is she not going to buy into this? And once she realized what Buddy's angle was, she said, you know what? I've just been through hell.
She's been through way too much, yeah.
I had a lover who went behind my back and did things that a lover shouldn't do to anyone.
It was all a lie, yeah.
So she's here without any sort of forward path, and this was a way to buy in for her future. and for her to have a purpose in life.
Yeah.
And I cannot blame her for accepting that.
Like, you would have to be an asshole to take that away from her.
Yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, you know what? You have nothing else going for you. Why not just cling to this and go with it?
How sad is that, though?
Yeah.
That we as viewers also know that that's not Charlie. But, you know, just like some people cling to religion, sometimes you just need that for comfort.
Yeah.
But that was definitely, it was not a happy ending for Emily Dodson by any measure.
No.
Because imagine having to deal with Matthew, like just in general, and what a degenerate he was.
Yeah.
And then to find out the man that what was the quote? What was the quote that the DA, Maynard Barnes, kept saying? Let's go to an island and burn the boats. Dickhead. Yeah, actually, yeah, she was the emotional dump truck in this series. And to be fair, we dumped a lot on her emotionally as well.
Yeah.
Like we were a few episodes away from grabbing our pitchforks. For Emily Dodson. But it is very interesting seeing what will unfold with the Radiant Assembly of God, because it seems like Emily is endorsing it. Right? So I guess we'll see what that means and what the interplays will be in the next season.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another cluster. I wrote cops, but then in brackets, mostly crooked cops. So the non-crooked cop that we have is Paul Drake and his wife, Clara Drake. We have Joe Innes, the crookedest of crooked, and Jean Holcomb.
When you look at Paul Drake, I think he's one of the people that has massive character development in this.
Oh, absolutely.
He's happy to play the part. He's happy to play the part of a black cop without rocking the boat.
Mm-hmm.
He knows where he stands in society. He's happy to go with that. He has a wife who's seemingly super keen to just accept the situation. And, you know, as long as we surviving, that's fine. But for Drake, there's so much to life more than surviving. And it should be that for everyone else. You need to be able to thrive. Mm-hmm. And for you to be able to thrive, we see Drake struggling with that sort of aspect. Yeah. Where do you draw the line between just accepting everything around you that's massively corrupt, that's massively insensitive, that's pushing you, making sure that you stay down, to the point where he starts crying.
Yeah.
Because he has, and listening to the wife, you see those sort of facial expressions when the wife is talking to her friends, saying, I don't care, as long as we just stay by our, we'll accept what it is. We'll take this money because it'll bring food to the table. I don't care. And
I think she had a veneer of the perception of being a cop, but at the same time, she wasn't realizing that he's a black cop. Right? And this was in the 1930s. There's definitely parallels that you can draw even to today, unfortunately. But this was in the 1930s where, even he admitted himself, there were some limitations, there were some arrests that he couldn't make pretty much. Yep. There are some things that he did need to turn a blind eye to, but even within his own realm of power, he did find that sense of power. Right? And what pissed me off about Clara was she only understood when it happened to her, or at least she was there when it happened. When they went, it was just a cute leisurely thing where they went to a beach somewhere else. Right? And she's like, oh, well, he's a cop. And and the white cop was like, well, who cares? Get lost. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't matter one iota. Right? And to see that sort of interplay, what I also really appreciate about Perry Mason is they didn't shy away from
the time.
Yep. And I guess even the sort of casual racism that will be thrown his way, whether it's through Ennis, whether it's through the captain, they didn't shy away from that, but it didn't become salacious like a Quentin Jerome Tarantino joint, right? Yeah. So it really It did it well. I definitely want to give some accolades in that regard. But at the end of the day, Paul Drake was, as they would say in The Wire, natural police.
Oh, he was natural police all day long.
And I do like, because you talked about him having immense character development, and he understood his limitations. But what I do like is he did test that limitations. There were lessons that he didn't need to learn, but he had to learn given the climate, right? And he did try and push back.
Yeah.
But then he was forced to change his report because that's not what Ennis and Holcomb were reporting, right? And that's where we have that cute sort of interplay with him and Perry Mason. Because it's like you see two very capable people and you just want them to work together.
Yeah, because you're stifled to just be the person that they expect you to be.
Yeah.
And to toe the line.
Yeah. And you see that he did his homework and he went to the rooftop because he knew it just didn't add up. It didn't make sense. And he was the one to find the partial sort of teeth, right? Who knew we could, unite ourselves by partial teeth? The For-You Reference household in 2020.
It was partial. It was part of the dentures.
I guess it gives a better meaning to word of mouth, if you'll pardon the pun. Why give me a fake laugh, OT? I give you some real rambunctious laughs.
I don't know if that deserved a rambunctious anything.
Just like Clara doesn't deserve anything. But yeah, there were definitely moments, especially with Ennis, offering to pay for the groceries. Like, there's paying for groceries and there's sending a message of like keeping you less.
Yeah.
Right? Making you feel less and keeping you in your place, so to speak. So that didn't sit well with me, but I'm glad that it didn't shy away from moments that don't sit well with you.
Yeah.
Right? Let's speak a bit about Ennis and Holcomb.
Oh, the most corrupt people ever.
The most corrupt people ever. There are many moments that reinforce Joe Ennis and how, well, I guess you could call him evil, or at least how much he followed through on, loose ends, right? And we see that with Seidel. And I don't know about you, OT, but I knew he wasn't going to make it to wherever he was going.
Of course not.
And when they got out of the car, it's like, come on, mate.
It was written in the tumbleweeds, man.
It was written in the tumbleweeds. The Gannons of love. But yeah, and it's interesting. I wonder if these people know, like, you feel that impending. Seidel, we got to see. So we didn't get to see Gannon, but Seidel, you could see that he had no idea. He was none the wiser. He was ready to sip his Corona on a beach somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So it was just very interesting to see the way that Ennis, he was very effective, I would say. He didn't leave anything to chance. And I have like face blindness, especially when too many characters get introduced to me. I get confused over who's who, but I think they showed Ennis. So if you remembered what Ennis looked like, you knew he was guilty from the start. But for me, it was a surprise because I forgot. It's just information overload. I'm sure there's a term for that. Maybe it's just KT overload, but who knows? But Joe Ennis was very effective, but also at the same time, as much as other people were loose ends and their clock was ticking, so was his.
Yeah.
What did you think about one of the final scenes with Joe Ennis and Gene Holcomb?
I did not see it coming. I did not see.
I did.
You did?
I did.
I did not. I thought make it a way that he's already gotten rid of the loose ends in Seidel. I thought that was it.
But the thing is, he knows too much and he'll build a grudge. And he was quite well versed in the brothel as well. So he was very integral to that, right? Yeah. And also with Charlie Dodson dying because of him overdosing through the breast milk, right? So it just all led back to Ennis. And the fact that, Perry Mason is like a dog with a bone, he wasn't going to let that go.
Yeah.
And that was made very clear.
You know what annoyed me?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the last episode where I think the start of the scene, we're in a court and Perry is grilling Ennis in the stand and you can see Ennis sweating. I was like, yes, I'm all for this. Come on. You've got him.
Yeah.
Only for them to revert back to Mason in his house with it's sort of a mock trial.
It's a visualization.
Yeah. That pissed me off.
But
I don't like being played. I was already getting excited.
Because you're the player.
Mm.
But it just drove towards the fact that they didn't have enough evidence against Ennis.
Yeah.
So they couldn't nail him.
But I wanted him to be in jail. Death was such an easy cop-out for him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what could you do? There wasn't anything you could do. And he was starting to perk up a bit too much. Definitely. So, but the interesting thing about that was it was very Shakespearean tragedy, you know? And I'm like, I hope Holcomb knows that he's the next one to go. like while he's doing this, I hope he knows.
Yeah, mate, it's coming for you. It's coming for you.
Like, just continue to make yourself useful, like Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. Like, just make yourself useful.
Well, we know how that ended for Littlefinger.
Spoiler. But I think, Game of Thrones is disappointing in the last season, at least anyway. So I feel like if you've watched Game of Thrones, you've watched it. I don't think there's going to be a new wave of Game of Thrones, right?
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah, I don't think so.
And that's not even the biggest spoiler in Game of Thrones anyway.
Yeah. Well, at least I'm just done with that world.
You're not looking forward to the prequels?
No, I'm ready to delve into something more, just something different.
Fair enough. But yeah, it was just interesting to see Holcomb not necessarily revel in it, but like surely he knows that it's on the horizon for him as well, right? So there you go. The last sort of cluster that I wanted to dive into is, I guess I called it like the legal system, right? So we have EB, we have Della Street, we have Maynard Barnes, who is the scoffing opposition, the district attorney. We have the judge, Fred Wright. And then we also have Hamilton Berger, who helps coach when we talked about that fantasy sort of sequence. He's the one that's coaching Perry Mason. And he's also the fella that might have potentially recruited Pete for the future seasons. So let's talk a bit about the legal sort of system in Perry Mason.
I loved it. I loved DB and what he tried to do. I think it was sad seeing he'd burnt so many bridges.
Yeah.
And no one was there for him at the end.
I don't think he burnt bridges. I think people were just fucking selfish.
You reckon? I think he just burnt bridges. Like with his partner, he'd stolen or embezzled money.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm romanticizing EB.
Yeah,
sorry.
Romanticizing him. He'd done shit. And he sort of relied that the fact that, we've been partners for this amount of years, we should be fine when I come and call, you'll be there at my beck and call, which isn't the case. So he slowly realized a lot of his friends weren't really there for him. And it became this sort of heavy burden for him to carry, to accept that he can't do anything for Emily. And that ultimately just led to him dying by suicide, which was really sad to see.
It was sad. I feel like because it was John Lithgow, I was waiting for the next episode, because it was like the end of the episode, right? So I was waiting for the next episode to show that like someone intercepted him and he didn't die, right? But he was gone. Like,
he was gone.
I feel like I didn't accept it. I was like, what the fuck is going on? It was interesting. Like you mentioned at the top of the episode, EB did serve as like a father figure for Perry Mason. And to feel that loss through Perry's lens was definitely something that was to be experienced through the show.
Yeah.
Especially with Della Street as well. I think we're all trying to figure out what a specific title was, because she was secretary, but she seemed to insert herself. Well, like, if you're the secretary and you're also like, I don't understand why she felt like her opinion was as important. It okay, fair enough. Emily ended up being innocent, but I felt like she backed her just because she was a woman.
Maybe so.
Like,
We
she
had
was
frustrations with
projecting.
her at the start of the show, for sure.
She was on like Ella Projection Street, right? But yeah, like it was interesting to see how, you know, once it got to EB and Della Street, it was kind of already done. Like Perry was the one that was bringing in all the information
Yeah.
as well. Is there anything you want to say about Maynard Barnes?
He's sleazy, man.
Right?
He's sleazier than Saul Goodman.
Like, yeah, he didn't have the
Yeah.
charisma of like Johnny Cochran or something.
No. He's just down dirty, sleazy lawyer.
Yeah, because I think it was in the closing remarks, you know, Perry Mason gave a very compelling speech about, you know, Emily Dodson and what she's gone through. And at the end of the day, this is about Charlie. And there's nothing really that the prosecution has brought up to even start to build a case against Emily, right? All they have is the affair, and, you know, they don't really have any sort of compelling evidence that she knew and she was involved in the kidnapping and the ransom, right? And you have this really inspirational, heartfelt, heartwarming speech from Perry Mason. And then you have Maynard Barnes coming up and be like, she's a whore.
You wanted to go to an island and burn the boat to. But then again, he's the reason why EB killed himself. At least I think he played such a big part in it, because he said that if EB did not recuse himself, he would reveal the details to the law board and get his license revoked that he embezzled.
Yeah.
So EB was never going to try that case one way or another.
He definitely strong-armed him.
Yeah.
Yeah. He flexed in all of the ways he could. What do you think about the judge?
I feel like the judge was always too pro district attorney. Like, he was too quick to side with Maynard in a lot of his motions, than at least trying to understand the aspect of the defense.
Well, they even had, you know, the interchange with EB and the judge. And, you know, EB's like, you're still young enough to make the right decisions. He's like, I'm old. I give up. Like, that was kind of where he was coming from. Anything that was easy to conclude, that's what he did. Right? So it was interesting to see the interplay, especially with Perry Mason, you know, with that legal sort of world. Like, you could feel that he was out of his depth, but you were cheering him on and wanting to, you just wanted him to do well.
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk a bit about Pete Strickland, because you said that they were the Bunk and the McNulty of this outfit. How do you feel about Pete in general?
I like Pete.
Because they were the two ragtags that took a picture of the chubby man eating cake off the lady's pussy, right?
Yeah. Pete always has Perry's back.
Absolutely.
To a fault. And I think one of those things where when Perry was going through a hard time with his just losing his house.
Yep.
And then he took it all out to Pete. And he's always been the sort of punching bag for when, because he's always close to, he's always there. He's always close proximity to Perry. So when Perry's not feeling away, he's always going to be the punching bag.
Yeah. And
it just happened that it was a bit too much, you know, it was one time too many. And he said, you know what? I can't do this. And I just fully understand him backing out from that case, and I accepted it. And I think what really just pushed him towards going to a different sort of lawyer at the end of it was when he learned that he didn't need to bribe.
Yeah.
When he didn't need to bribe a jury.
Who knew bribery could be so sad?
When he didn't need to bribe a juror.
Because it was 3.
Yeah.
So even if he hadn't have paid the person, there still would have been 2 against.
There would have still been a mistrial. Yep.
Fuck, man.
Yep.
And I think that's what's even more sad, because because you can definitely see an age gap with Pete Strickland and also Perry Mason. And, whether it's true or not, Pete does, give himself credit for teaching Perry everything he knows. And it seems like he's gotten to a point where he realized that, Perry Mason has exceeded him in a lot of senses. And not to say that there's a feeling of inadequacy, but I guess he felt like there's not much more he can do. Like, he always felt like his role was to get in and fix stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And the bribery is a classic example of that. And then once he realized that he doesn't need to do that, like, maybe this was his opportunity to try and focus on himself.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful, but it's also very sad because, for as brothel loving as he was, we did latch on to him as a character.
We really did.
More than the women latched on to him. I don't know if you want to end on this note, but we haven't talked about Lupe at all.
There's nothing to say about Lupe. I do not recognize her as a character in this show.
She's fucking gross, right?
Yeah. And then at the end of it, Perry Mason giving her a letter saying she understands and she can take the house with the full blessing. I'm like, psh, piss off. She used Perry. She knew what she was doing from the get-go.
Absolutely.
I don't really buy that sort of love story. She didn't really have any sort of affections for him. Even with the way they're having sex, it was always about her.
Oh, yeah.
So at the end of it, I'm like, good riddance. Hopefully Perry doesn't go away.
Because that's...
And
yes.
I think Perry will ultimately end up with Alice. So that's what I'm rooting for.
Wow. They put those sprinkles in there for the stands.
Yeah, I know.
And you were eating up every morsel.
I'm biting all of them.
Is that the first time I've growled on here? Oh my. What are you doing to me, OT? Yeah, Lupe was a fucking problem. And like a lot of the times in media or in life, the man gets what they want sexually and the woman is made to feel empty. I don't think the answer to that is to make the woman the other way.
Yeah.
Right? But in any case, that's what we got in the show. I guess the last thing that is a bit more sweeter that I do want to end on is Della Street and her relationship with Hazel. Because she was also in a show that you watched as well.
We love Hazel. She's in what was it? Last Man Standing.
And I hope that is the last time you ever mention that on the podcast.
It is, because when she left, I stopped watching that show.
I guess I just wanted to mention them introducing, an LGBT story and how it didn't feel like they were fully hedging their bets on this storyline being the most important thing. It was very natural.
It really was.
They just put it in the story and we were there to consume it. And I definitely enjoyed that storyline, but also this fucking series, friends and lovers.
Yep.
Thank you for embarking and docking on this journey of the HBO series Perry Mason.
Ooh.
We're going to finish in a segment we call For Your Reference. OT.
I'm going to reference two shows. If you love Matthew Rhys, you'll find him on The Americas. It ended, which I've yet to see the final season. I'm saving it for when Katie actually watches the show.
All right.
So super exciting times ahead. And then the second one will be Off in Black, who, if you really want to see Tatiana Maslany just fully kill it in each and every level, her acting chops is just amazing. Super great. So those are my two references.
I also want to commend OT on editing out 2 hours worth talking about Tatiana. I will reference The Wire. And where you can stay wired to us on a day-to-day basis on Twitter and Instagram, we are For Your FPod.
You can write us an email at hello@fypodcast.com.
We're also on Apple Podcasts if you'd like to leave a review or rating. And we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Bye.